Levying under the oppressive rules of our HO meant I couldn't have friends over past 8 p.m., while board members partied late into the night without a care. But everything changed when my dad, a formidable construction mogul who oversaw every renovation project in our neighborhood, decided to teach them a lesson they'd never forget. The doorbell rang just as my buddy Jake was trouncing me in our favorite video game. I checked my phone 8:15 p.m. Who'd show up this late? When I opened the door, Mrs. Carter stood there, arms crossed, lips tight, flanked by two other HOA board members, Mr. Evans and Mrs. Brooks, like they were her enforcers. "Your guests need to leave now, Mrs. Carter snapped, jabbing a finger at the cars in my driveway. Her tone could have chilled the warm summer night. "We've got a new Relino of Y-Siders after 8 p.m. in Oakwood Estates." I blinked, baffled. "What? Since when?" "Since last week's meeting," Mr. Evans said, pushing up his glasses. "It was voted on and passed." Jake and a couple other friends peeked out behind me, confused. "Everything cool, man?" Jake whispered. "Apparently, there's a new no Y-Siders after 8 rule," I said, still reeling from the sudden confrontation. Mrs. Carter tapped her watch. It was 8:17 now and insisted they leave or I'd face a violation. My friends started grabbing their stuff, but I couldn't shake my frustration. "I never got any notice about this," I argued, my temper flaring. "All homeowners were emailed," Mrs. Brooks replied, avoiding my gaze. "It's to keep our community peaceful." As my friends shuffled out, I spotted something that made my blood boil. 3 houses down, board member Mrs. Lawson's place was glowing with lights, at least 8 cars parked out front, and music drifting through the air. Her so-called book club, really just a wine party, was in full swing. "What about Mrs. Lawson's gathering?" I asked, pointing. "Plenty of Y-Siders there after 8 o'clock. Mrs. Carter barely glanced over. "Board members are exempt when it's community business." "Book club is community business?" I shot back, sarcasm dripping. "Don't complicate this, Mr. Evans warned. "First violation's a warning. Second's a do law 100 fine. Third's do law 250. After that, we can lien your property." After my friends left, I stewed alone in my levying room. This wasn't the first absurd rule they'd pulled. Last month, they banned driveway basketball hoops. Before that, garden gnomes couldn't be taller than 12 inches. Yet somehow, the board always dodged their own restrictions. The next morning, I called my dad. James Carter wasn't just any data, was the regional director at Carter Construction, the top firm in 3 counties, handling nearly every big renovation around, including Oakwood Estates. "They did what?" His gruff voice boomed when I told him how they'd kicked my friends out at 8:15 while board members partied. "That's not right. I'm coming over tomorrow to check your HOA docs. I need to look at the clubhouse project bid anyway." When Dad arrived, he brought files on upcoming neighborhood projects. He spent hours dissecting my HOA bylaws, scribbling notes and muttering. "Here's the issue," he said, tapping a clause. "New rules affecting property use need 30 days, written notice, and a 2/3 vote from all homeowners, not just the board." "Did you get notice?" "Was there a full vote?" "No, just an email last week saying it was done," I replied. He nodded. "They're breaking their own rules." But that's not all. He unrolled blueprints for the clubhouse renovation, a do-law $1.2 million job that'd hike our dues by 30 fan tram. His company was the top contender. "The board's been rushing their own home upgrades while stalling everyone else's," he said, showing me records he'd pulled as a potential contractor. Mrs. Carter got her patio approved in 2 days. Your neighbor, Mr. Ortiz, has waited 3 months for a deck. My jaw dropped. Can they do that? Not legally. Or ethically. They're abusing power. He gathered his papers with a sly grin. Carter Construction doesn't have to bid on their projects. Sometimes, people need a hard lesson in fairness. That night, Mrs. Carter showed up again. My college buddy Ryan had just arrived for the weekend. I was clear yesterday, she said, eyeing his bag. No Y-Siders after 8 o'clock. Before I could answer, Dad stepped up. Evening, Mrs. Carter. James Carter, Carter Construction, he said smoothly, his tone steely. I've been reviewing your bylaws, interesting stuff. Her face shifted. Mr. Carter, what a surprise, she stammered. Just helping my son know his rights, Dad said. Like how rules need 30 days notice and a full vote. Unless VYing a friend over after 8 o'clock is a safety issue. Well, emergency pro VY science she started. I'd love to see those meeting minutes, Dad cut in, and proof of a community vote. My son might waive the notice if you can show it was legit. Mrs. Carter floundered, then muttered, I'll consult the board. Great idea, Dad said. While you're at it, check your project approvals. I've noticed some odd patterns that might interest the State Housing Authority. After she scurried off, Ryan gaped. Dude, your dad's a legend. What just happened? Dad chuckled. The board's about to learn actions have consequences. 3 days later, no more HOA VY sits. My friends came and went past 8 o'clock freely. But I knew it wasn't over. Emergency board meeting tonight, my neighbor Lily texted. She worked from home and saw everything. Lots of tense faces at Mrs. Carter's. Dad, back at his office, stayed in touch. Perfect timing, he said when I called. Clubhouse bids due tomorrow. I've been making calls. To who? I asked, curious and a bit anxious. Every contractor, plumber, electrician, and landscaper in Oakwood Estates, he said. We all agree on selective rule nonsense. The next night, the HOA's monthly meeting filled the outdated clubhouse, squeaky floors, shaky AC, and a packed crowd. Lily whispered, something's up. Even Mr. Chin from the cul-de-sacs here, and he's a hermit. Mrs. Carter opened, her usual swagger dimmed. We're tabling the VY cider curfew for more community input, she said. Murmurs rippled. I hid a grin. Then, onto the big topic. We plan to pick a contractor for the clubhouse tonight, she said, fidgeting. Mr. Evans stood, grim. All 3 shortlisted firms pulled out. Every contractor in the county declined. The room buzzed. Mrs. Brooks hushed them. We asked why. They cited business discretion and scheduling, but it feels coordinated. What about the renovation? Someone shouted. Costs will jump 30 to 40 fan tram with out-of-county bids, Mrs. Carter admitted. A sharp-looking man Dr. Hayes, from the big house, spoke up. I got a call from James Carter yesterday. He raised concerns about HOA management. Mrs. Carter flushed. Mr. Carter has no authority. As a dues-paying homeowner, Dr. Hayes cut in. I'm troubled. Selective enforcement, fast-tracked board projects, delayed others. It's serious. Nods and whispers spread. Lily nudged me. Your dad. I just smiled. The meeting spiraled as residents aired grievances. Mrs. Rivera's 6-month wait for a door pane approval. Mr. Patel's fine for his mom's VY sit. Mrs. Carter texted furiously, then stormed over. Your father's behind this, isn't he? Behind contractors' choices? Residents speaking up? I said coolly. Tell him we need to talk. I'll pass it on, I replied. But he's booked for 6 months in fair neighborhoods. Her face twisted. Without renovations, property values will tank. The pool needs fixes, the gate's ancient. I get it, I said. It's not about projects, it's about fairness. Maybe the board should too. Just then, the AC groaned and died, heat creeping in. Recess, Mrs. Carter barked. Outside, Dad texted. How's it going? Better than expected, I replied. They're melting down literally. Good, he said. We want fairness, not harm. Saturday at 7:15 a.m., a sharp knock woke me. Mrs. Carter, Mr. Evans, and a suited guy stood there. This is Daniel Pierce, our attorney, Mrs. Carter said with a fake smile. We need to discuss an urgent matter. Pierce handed me a card. We believe your father's orchestrating a contractor boycott, possibly illegal interference. Dad decides his business, I said. So do other contractors. We'll sue, Pierce said. You too for encouraging this. On what grounds? I asked, steady despite my racing heart. Tortious interference, he smirked. And an injunction for Carter Construction's contracts. They never signed anything, I said. Declining a bid's legal. Mrs. Carter leaned in. We'll drop the curfew if your dad resumes business. Not enough, I said. What about others delayed while board members got favors? You can't demand, Mr. Evans started. I pulled my phone. Dad said to record this. I hit record. Mr. Pierce, you threatened to sue me. I outlined remedies, he backpedaled. Sounds like intimidation, I said. Wonder what the bar thinks. Mrs. Carter shoved a weak compromise at me. I handed back Dad's terms. Board resigns, new election, full audit. She exploded, but Pierce whispered, and she relented. We'll consider it. Take your time, I said. Dad's talking to the county Monday about HOA oversight. Later, news hit pool closed, no maintenance. Neighbors Lily, Jeremy, Mrs. Diaz showed up. Your fault. Lily asked. I explained. They're punishing everyone, Jeremy growled. Let's hold our own meeting, I said. No board. Lily offered her yard. By Monday, Dad texted, county inspectors checking clubhouse fire safety. Might close it. At Lily's, 60 neighbors packed in. Mr. Gray, a retired lawyer, confirmed bylaws were violat and outlined option special election with 25 fan tram signatures, financial transparency demands. Then, a text from Mrs. Brooks. We need to talk privately. Not all agree with Victoria Carter. She confessed over the phone Mrs. Carter's husband's firm overcharged for maintenance, and reserve funds were misused. I've got proof, she said. At Lily's, she showed it all bank records, invoices, real minutes. The curfew targeted younger residents for fines. Mrs. Carter stormed in furious. Evelyn, you traitor. It's over, Mrs. Brooks said. Mr. Gray presented the petition 50 fan tram signatures for resignation. Dad appeared. The county's interested in oversight laws. Maybe that Carter rules. She deflated. What do you want? Fairness, Dad said. Resign. 3 weeks later, the new board Lily, Dr. Hayes, others took over in a cooled clubhouse. Pool reopened. Dad grinned. Proud of you. You fought for everyone. I learned from you, I said. That night, friends came over past 8 o'clock, laughing freely. Oakwood Estates had changed for good.